I'm Rosemary Atkinson, and I'm co-chair along with Gloria Smith of Family Promise. Family Promise is opening up to families. Our church will be hosting 2 families with children the week of May 15th. There will be a meeting this Thursday morning, the 17th, at 10 o'clock here in Jackson Hall for our volunteers to meet with our support church volunteers from Annunciation Cathedral. They are an enthusiastic group and will be a pleasure to work with. If you wish to volunteer in this program, please plan to attend. For those of you who may be new, our church is involved with Family Promise. We will be accepting 2 families with children to stay in our church overnight for 1 week in May. They will stay in our amazing day center during the day, where they will receive the kind of support that they need. They will be coming to our church for dinner, sleepover, and breakfast with a sack lunch for the day.
Was that one of your compositions? Wow. Our opening words today are from Oscar Romero, They're adapted. Peace is not the product of terror or fear. Peace is not the silence of cemeteries. Peace is not the silent result of violent repression. Peace is the generous, tranquil contribution of all to the good of all. Peace is dynamism. Peace is generosity. It is right, and it is duty. Wes, would you light the chalice for us today? Thank you. And while Wes lights the chalice, let's read our chalice lighting words together. We light our chalice today to illumine the path toward peace. We pray for an end to this war and every war. We raise our hope and commit our energy to building peace. And our opening hymn is number 143, Not in Vain the Distance Beacons, and it's in your hardback hymnal. Please rise as you're willing and able. And greet your neighbors now. The words of affirmation, if the children and anyone who feels childlike today would like to do the children's part, that would be wonderful, and the rest of you can read whatever part you like. Ready? Okay. We believe in love. Love is the only doctrine of this church. We believe in truth. The quest for truth is our sacrament. We believe in helping others, and service is our prayer. We believe in the sacredness of life, to dwell together in peace, seek knowledge and freedom, serve humanity in fellowship, and cherish the earth and its creatures. This do we covenant, each with the other.
Now. Sorry. Every time I do a story for all ages, I learn so much. And this particular story is exceptionally valuable to all of us, I believe. I learned a lot. It is called Survivor Tree, and maybe some of you have heard of this. It's a story of something that actually has happened in our real lives. The author is Marcy Colleen, and the illustrator is Aaron Becker. And I wanted to read a couple of words that they said as they were investigating this subject before completing this beautiful book. Marcy Colleen was a teacher on 9/11 in the classroom. And she knew about this particular tree, which you are going to learn more about. Usually it's a pear tree. They live for about 20 years. And at the time of 9/11, it was already 30 years old, planted near the Twin Towers. And she read her manuscript for this book, which was published in 2021, so it's very really new. And she took it to the tree, and she touched the tree's limb, and she said, "I will tell your story." And that is this book. The artist, Aaron Becker, said he visited the nursery where the tree was rehabilitated, as you're going to find out, in the Bronx. There's a nursery. And he said, "This tree showed hope. Even in the darkest of times, life will find its way." And that is what this book tells us. Survivor Tree. I wish we could see the pictures better, but this is the skyline of Manhattan. A tree stood, steel straight and proud, at the foot of the towers that filled the sky. It grew, mostly unnoticed, silently marking the seasons. It's dwarfed by the skyscrapers. In wintertime, the tree's bare bones stretch tall, reaching for the freezing bright blue above. Come spring, white flowers blossomed, and piles of petals scattered as people rushed by below. Glossy green leaves announced the arrival of summer, casting polka-dotted shade on the sidewalk. And in fall, the tree blazed red with 1,000,000 hearts before each took off in an elegant dance. And I would like to show this picture. And so it went for almost 30 years. Winter, spring, summer, fall, bare, white, green, red. Winter, spring, summer, and fall, September. One September day, the perfect blue sky exploded. Under the blackened remains, the tree lay crushed and burned. Workers dug through the wreckage and discovered unexpected green. tree was taken far from the smoldering landscape to fresh soil, where its shattered stump encountered a different sky. And this is at a nursery in the Bronx. 2 stone blocks were placed in its stunted shadow, a memorial of makeshift towers in a makeshift home. No longer stretching tall, the tree reached deep into the warm earth, and all was quiet. Winter passed. The tree was bare. Spring arrived without flowers, but a flutter of speckled wings and eggs. Then one day, buds to blossoms, blossoms to leaves. Though charred and gnarled, the tree began to grow. And so it went for almost 10 years. White, green, red, bare. Spring, summer, fall, and winter. It was time to go home. And I need to show this to Reverend Klein. Now at this point, I'm thinking the tree, it was 30 years old when it was in 9/11, 2001. It must be, how old now? 40 years old? The tree hesitated to, well, I mean, at the time it was moved. It was 10 years later, yeah. The tree hesitated to fill the empty sky. People no longer rushed by. Instead, they stopped and wept beside 2 forever-filling pools. So this is obviously at the memorial site where the tree was planted. And they noticed the tree. Fingers traced the timeline. Worn palms pressed the old wound, the bark joining the past to the present. Today, the tree rises, steel straight and proud, beside the footprints of the towers that once filled its sky, silently marking the seasons, blazing with 1,000,000 red hearts in the fall. And I was coming 45 minutes early today to make a copy of the story as if it were in an encyclopedia. Very fascinating about this tree. And something I didn't realize in the story, but later as I was doing some research on this subject, that there is a reminder of this tree every year, starting in 2013, where there is an award to 3 communities or nations in the whole world which have suffered devastation, hopelessness, and then this is to help them find hope and rebirth. They receive a seedling of this tree. Isn't that beautiful? And here are some examples that will certainly touch you as they touched me, I'm sure. Just a few. The first one was given in 2013, and these events don't have to happen in the year that the award was given, that the tree seedling was provided to these 3 communities or nations. But it so happens that it was in 2013 that the Boston Marathon bombing occurred. And so Boston received the tree. That was one of, in the first year. There were 2 other places, but I'm just going to hit a few that are particularly showing the different types of places which received these trees. And then in 2015, Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook Elementary School. I'm not going to tell what happened because I think that's all close to our hearts already. Then in 2017, the award went to Charleston, South Carolina, to the Emmanuel African American Methodist Church. For obvious reasons, that might not be as well known as the other 2, but 9 were killed in the shooting in the church as they prayed. In 2016, Orlando, Florida, where the Pulse nightclub had a terrible tragedy. And in 2018, the Puerto Rican Hurricane Maria, I had no idea that almost 3,000 people died in that. I hadn't recalled that. And finally, the last one I'm going to mention, well, the next to the last, 2019, in Greece. It was given to the nation of Greece because of the wildfires that were going on in in 2018. And just this past year, 2021, the World Health Organization received the seedling of the survivor tree.
At this time, we recognize the milestones in our lives by lighting candles of joy and concern. I invite anyone who'd like to do that to come forward at this time. We raise up our thanks this day for the surprises that give us hope, for the green that remains when fires and destruction happen, for people who survive difficult times, for our sisters and brothers in Ukraine who are struggling with a war they didn't ask for or cause. We give thanks for this community, for all those people who will step up when there's a need, for short or longer periods of time, and do what needs to be done to keep things going, to keep things strong, to keep hope alive. We give thanks for all those in this congregation who do all that they can to keep hope alive. So may it always be. Amen. I invite you now to join in singing Spirit of Life. The words are printed in the program.
Giving life.
the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Now I invite everybody to turn to the back of their hymnals to number 586. And this reading, where you're going to respond in the words that are italicized, was written by somebody we are very, very familiar with, Abraham Lincoln. Excuse me. Okay, I will start. As labor is the common burden of our race, so the effort of some to shift their share of the burden onto the shoulders of others is the great, durable curse of the race.
As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master.
This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy.
Our reliance is in our love for liberty. Our defense is in the spirit which prizes liberty as the heritage of all people in all lands, everywhere.
Destroy this spirit, and we have planted the seeds of despotism at our own doors.
Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves and cannot long retain it.
Why should there not be a patient confidence in the ultimate justice of the people? Is there any better or equal hope in the world?
Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it. At this time, I invite us to share gifts to support the work of the church. We are no longer passing the plate, but if anyone would like to make a contribution, the plate is in the middle. You can also send gifts or pledges to the church office. Frederick Douglass wrote, this is entitled, "The Limits of Tyrants." Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. indeed. I want to believe it's different, and I want to hope that it's different. And as I share the sermon, I want to invite you to think of things that we can do and ways that we can make it better. And I'll invite you to share those after I share my thoughts. Oh, and I want to acknowledge that if you notice the Ukrainian flag outside, that Leslie inspired me to get that. So thank her for that if you are in support. War and peace. Matters of war and peace have had a significant role throughout my ministry, beginning with my decision to consider ministry and enter seminary. I grew up in the Vietnam War era. I remember frequent discussions in grade school and high school about the likelihood that nuclear weapons would be used. Fortunately, they weren't used in that conflict, but it certainly seemed at times that they might be as the war escalated. The Vietnam War was on the nightly news each evening, so it was hard to get away from it. There have been debates for decades over the impact of war coverage and how much should have been shown and how children were affected. Flag-draped caskets arriving home were not even close to being the most horrific images of that war. One important decision for me that was influenced by war was to avoid the fields of physics and nuclear science, engineering and design, because I did not want anything I might create to further such insane human suffering. Consequently, psychology, history, philosophy, and religion became much higher areas of interest for me. In many ways, the Vietnam War is what led me towards seminary and ministry. When I was disappointed with the actions of leaders at the Methodist Seminary where I started studying for ministry, I was drawn by my interest in pacifism to enroll at Bethany Theological Seminary, the one seminary of the pacifist Church of the Brethren. I have been just a hair's breadth away from being a complete pacifist since my high school days, when I filed a statement with my local draft board that should the recently ended draft resume, I would seek conscientious objector status. Philosophically, I reserved the possibility of removing a Hitler or Stalin from power by force and defending loved ones, though I could not support a widespread war, especially in the nuclear era. I largely accepted the war against Hitler as a just and necessary war, and I honored my father's service in that war. My father's family, by the way, was Jewish, though he was second-generation American. Watching another European war progress has been painful as I remember the loss of connections to my Jewish roots in Hungary, Austria, and Germany, which I have felt all my life as a result of the Second World War. The displacement of millions of war refugees throughout Europe will impact every nation and every family displaced for years, if not decades, to come. Children, many of whom are now orphans, will need care for many years and may never find their way to reconnect with relatives. Couples are being separated and able-bodied men expected to stay in Ukraine to fight. Millions of women, children, and elderly are escaping to seek refuge where they can, left homeless by a war attributable solely to Putin. This war, so senseless, inflicted without any reason other than to build an empire for Putin, is the worst kind of conflict, especially when played out under the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. Even if Putin wins his war, Russia and the Russian people will be hurt almost as much as Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Russia is now isolated, a pariah among the nations. The NATO alliance is holding strong, and the world, including the US, is accepting the costs involved in the loss of fossil fuels and the humanitarian costs of providing for millions of refugees. How long this global disaster will take may be solely in the hands of the Ukrainian people fighting for justice and democracy in their homeland. But it will take years to repair the damage being done. Many of the wars fought by human nations and tribes have lacked justification, but this war especially lacked any reason other than Putin's desire for conquest. That the gathered countries of the United Nations have condemned it only serves to underline how lacking in justification it is. More than 15,000 courageous Russians have already been arrested for protesting the war, when even daring to call it a war or to tell the truth about it, to report about it, has been outlawed. Thousands of Russian soldiers have already died, along with probably more thousands of Ukrainian men, women, and children. No matter what Putin ultimately wins or loses, the cost in human lives and the devastation of Ukraine is inexcusable. Many of us hoped that the 21st century would be less oriented to war than the 20th, that negotiations between nations could be accomplished without so much bloodshed. With nukes remaining a background threat, why continue to have wars? Humanity really needs to be focused on cleaning up pollution, ending the use of fossil fuels, and keeping global temperatures from going any higher. There is so much important work to do to prevent a global ecological catastrophe, but Putin thinks he needs to build an empire. Every time it looks like the world will actually come together to work on climate change, someone decides to do something else. Putin's war will not just cost the lives of thousands of people in Russia and Ukraine, it will also put millions, possibly billions of others in jeopardy by the delay it will cause in working on climate change. When the war ends, it will likely take years to rebuild trust and relationships that are needed for united efforts to change the course of human history by stepping back from the worst impacts of climate change. Like so many politicians and political and corporate leaders who are only interested in the short-term bottom line and their own success, Putin has lost sight of the big picture for humanity. When his society collapses, nobody will remember his empire building, but everyone left will remember how many lives his war cost. The increasing fuel costs may have political consequences down the road, but they are also serving to make electric cars seem more affordable. We still have a long way to go in having charging stations available for driving across the country, but progress is being made. As electric cars become more affordable and more available, I will certainly consider trading in my gas-guzzling Prius. It will also help to see cleaner energy powering the electric grid as solar and windmill farms are replacing coal-fired power plants. If we can turn to clean energy rather than reopening oil wells and coal mines, then even Putin's war may have some accidental upsides. But the waste in human lives and the destruction of Ukraine are inexcusable. I've supported the efforts of the United Nations as long as I have been able to understand them, starting with UNICEF when I was in grade school. I have long hoped that the gathering of nations could become more successful in stopping wars. Even in our nation, which hosts many of the operations of the UN, there is often only tepid support. Opponents of the UN often claim that too many member nations are not democratic, though many of those folks also seem to make our own nation less of a democracy. The nations with vetoes in the Security Council have often abused them, as Russia most recently has done. The UN may not be perfect, but it is the only gathering of the nations. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, formed in 1949, is probably the second best hope for keeping nuclear nations in check, though it has usually been dominated by the United States. At this point, it appears to be the only thing that keeps Putin from pushing beyond Ukraine into Central Europe. The US has by far the most nukes, but a nuclear war with either Russia or China would almost certainly make Earth uninhabitable by humans and most species of animals even sooner than climate change. Mutually assured destruction. We remain the only nation to have used nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the Second World War in 1945. Any war involving a nuclear power runs the risk of escalating, so the involvement of the United States should be and is being carefully calculated, strategized, and limited. By treaty, we are obligated to join in defending any of the NATO nations, which so far appears to be the boundary even Putin dares not cross. I've probably read too much science fiction, but I do sometimes wonder if Mars once had sentient creatures that made such powerful weapons that they destroyed everything but the bare rock. Putin is certainly not the first human to have rained down devastating destruction on the people of another nation, nor the first to threaten to use nuclear weapons, nor the first to seek to build his own empire. Even without the nuclear weapons, humans seem intent on destroying the Earth, or at least everything on the surface of our home planet. A nuclear war would certainly speed up that process, and there are several times the necessary weapons stockpiled to destroy everything living, except perhaps the cockroaches. They can survive anything. I continue to hope that Putin will come to his senses and stop this war, but what would stop a megalomaniac? The costs of war are far too high in this modern era. The precious lives of too many amazing, creative people have already been forfeit. Over the centuries, humans have found so many ways to solve conflicts without resorting to war. Why would any nation inflict such harm on another people, especially one filled with ethnic sisters and brothers? What was it that Putin feared from the growing democracy in Ukraine? Did he fear that the Russian people would demand their freedom and self-determination? What relic of power is Putin trying to hold on to make him wage war now? I remember so many songs from the 60s and 70s that we sang at peace rallies, and yes, I almost got out my guitar. Where have all the flowers gone? Blowing in the wind. Let there be peace on earth. Imagine. If I had a hammer, we shall overcome. I used to know the guitar chords to most of them. It's been a while since I've sung them. Those songs help to connect so many of us with the foolishness of war, the tragedy, and the hope that people would move beyond war. Our own nation spends trillions of dollars on the military and weapons systems, ships and planes and missiles. We spend far more than any other nation. But money and weapons and armies can't stop all the wars. There must be a change of heart among the peoples of the earth to make war truly an unacceptable option. We sit on the sidelines of this war, but many would have done more or less, perhaps drawing us further into Putin's war or allowing him even more freedom to build his empire. When will we ever learn? I'd like to say that we stand at a crossroads where humanity can forever turn away from war, but we've been here before, far too many times. And each time we've chosen a road that still allows wars. As often as our words have spoken against war, our nation has increased the military budget, for we humans are a warring species. We compete for everything. We hold on to our grudges. We want more stuff, even when we have plenty. We fear letting down our guard, lest another nation gets an advantage. And so we have wars large and small, and people suffer and die. And the cycle continues as it has down through the generations. And many of us will die with our swords, our knives, our guns in our hands, while others will die in our schools, our apartments, our offices, our hospitals. Still others will die of hunger and thirst as the cycle continues, until we break the cycle, until we stop spending trillions of dollars preparing for war, until we normalize peace and sing of peace and negotiate for peace. War and peace are both choices. Choose peace. Shalom, salam, blessed be, namaste, and amen. And now I invite your thoughts, your comments, your hopes for peace, and what we could do to make a difference. I invite you to join in number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. Stand as you're comfortable. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on the day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died, to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. invite you to connect with each other as you are comfortable. May this congregation always be dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there's a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity. May the stars carry your sadness away. May the flowers fill your heart with beauty. May hope forever wipe away your tears. And above all, may love make you strong. Go out now in peace and help to build a better world. Amen. Yes?